forget there's some phony money for you here that is not legal tender, but I guess someone was asking for it. All right. It says we're happening. And then the screen does a lot of weird things. So this evening we gather again to ask the Lord's blessing. And we're going to be looking at Exodus 20:15. And that is going to be our study verse A. So let's go to our wonderful Hebrew passage. There it is up on the screen. Sorry about the advertising. You shall not steal. Wait, you shall steal not is the way we would have. You're supposed to read it here in the English, but the Hebrew people read from right to left. So the negation is there, lo. We've been seeing that in front of a lot of the commandments. Do not, do not. And then another two-word sentence, but everything contained in you shall not steal, lo. And then the word tig. It starts with last week I called it the Greek letter. This is a tet, and I called it a tau. But it's a tet, gimel, noon, and then the bait. And they have the phonetic spelling up there for you to say it, teganav. And if you notice that B is underlined there, which is telling you in the phonetic rendering, don't pronounce it as a B. You see underneath that B? They're telling you to give it a V. So, lo teganav. And the root of the word here is this gimel noon bait. And so I love this program. So you can go to the phonetic spelling, and this is called Bible Hub. You should use it. Again, no financial remuneration for mentioning it. And what it does, it's interesting that you can search it. Wow, I guess maybe the internet doesn't want to help me out here today. It's spinning. Text, the estimate. You see it, this line right here. Tiganav, that's going to be our passage. Then they got one starting with a Vav. Vayignav. So all of those verses there, or references there, are all the Old Testament references that are built on that root word of stealing. So there's a number of stealing passages in the Old Testament. Don't take my stuff. And it's interesting to see the commentators try to make a case. Either way, is this really related to the overarching political persuasion of the Jewish people not being socialistic, that everyone has their own property and they must defend it and protect it? Or is that reading too much into the passage? So if you got people wanting to protect people's property, then you start having a case for people's individual rights to make and to earn and to possess and to profit and to benefit. And that if it's not yours, it's not yours. Don't desire it, don't want it, don't steal it. We'll get to the wanting part, I guess, when we get to do not covet. But if someone has the means and they make wealth and they produce wealth, you should bless them for, and the word gets used a lot in the commentaries about providence. What has God brought you providentially that belongs to you? And you should expect that people would respect your property so that you could share it if you needed to, rather than having someone abscond it from you. Big word to the government there. So it seems like the discussion about whether this is just about personal relationships or is this a foundation for building, societies and their political and economic principles. I think if you start reasoning down the road, you get to building societies that regard this as a key factor in people trusting and doing what they're supposed to do. We can return again to the whole idea of covenants. And if someone makes a contract with you and says, I'm going to do these things, X, Y, and Z, but at any point they don't do one of those things, they're either lying or stealing or misrepresenting. And a number of these passages here in the Hebrew actually talk about being deceived. So like even deception being considered some way of stealing something from someone, not delivering on what was promised, would be another way of saying they stole something from you. They stole the dignity of their words, or
stole their birthright.
I was going to ask you guys to talk about some of the famous stealing passages of the Bible, but I was going to look up one of these that really occurred to me as being interesting. So this word right here, ganav, would be the real root of teganav that's expressed in Exodus. And here's this really interesting thing I found about this particular verse, Exodus 22. And it's telling you, it's lighting it up in red, that this ganav. Everyone okay? Did I make a joke? Oh, do we need a?
It's just
sorry. What you see here is the red rendered is being actually stolen. But if you look at the Hebrew word here, and I know that you're not going to know what that means, but here you see a gimel and a gimel. The word is being actually repeated twice. Ganav, ganav, ye ganav, ganav, ye ganav. So it is about stealing, but this is like, you've stolen, to mean you actually stole. To say it twice is to be very redundant in this particular passage.
Is that parallelism there?
No, not parallelism.
When it's right smack next to each other, it's not in it.
Yeah.
It's like holy, holy, holy.
Yeah, it's like stolen.
Emphasis at.
Yes, this is a double thievery moment. So anyway, don't know if you'll ever say ganav again, but that's all the renderings of this use of this word throughout the Old Testament related to "you shall not steal." Stories from the Bible. Which one to mind?
Nathan's story about the sheep.
Okay, all right.
You were thinking of a different one.
No, you said I'll tell you. I'll show you in a minute. But yes, Nathan's parable to King David about a rich man stealing a poor man's sheep. That's a really, what do you say, vibrant parable. I did a little talk for the men's breakfast and Bible study that we do here monthly, and I was talking about how the parables that Jesus tell, a major emphasis of Jesus' parables is to make people upset. The stories that he tells, if you just look through his parables, something's going wrong, or something happens where the hearer would say, why would you do that? What is going on here? And so in the same sense, when Nathan tells a parable to David, it's explicitly to get him riled up, and then to say, well, it's kind of interesting you're getting upset about this now because you actually did what I just described. And for all of the foibles that David has in his life, and God calls him, we know him by two ways. I'm going a little sidebar here, aren't I? A man after God's own heart, but also a man of blood and a man of war, so much so that God didn't want him to be the one erecting the temple. But it is at least some bit of consolation that soon as Nathan calls him out, he immediately confesses his sin. But boy, he bore a ton of consequences as a result. Nathan went after him. God went after him about what would happen to his household because of this deliberate sin. But that was last week's
I wouldn't
message.
want to be in Nathan's shoes.
To go up to the king and pull that off?
Really, when you think about the most powerful king, feared by most,
Yeah.
and had men that came from other nations to serve him because he was
Very
so
good.
great and powerful and honorable.
Yeah.
And you have to stand before him and say, "You are the man."
That's the way I wish a lot of us pastors could be when we go before congregations. Just to say it
But
and let the consequences fall where they may.
But the big difference between Nathan's parable that he's telling and Christ's parables is that every one of Christ's parables point to himself. Though they're evangelistic in nature. They still expose sin to a degree, but mainly it's pointing back to him. Where Nathan's parable was ends up being accusatory.
Oh yeah. Well, Jesus would tell a few parables, and the Pharisees would say, "Hey," or the apostles or disciples would say to him, "Hey, they know you're talking about. You told that parable to accuse them."
Yeah.
So, but you're the first person in my entire life that I've ever heard say that the parables were supposed to be evangelistic in nature.
I haven't seen that. I have all of his parables, it seems to me, point to the kingdom.
Right. Well, a lot of them have as a preamble, the kingdom of heaven is like. And the one thing that I typically have glommed onto, because I've heard it and see it, is God's relationship to Israel being depicted in those parables. And but very good. I believe that some of them definitely are evangelistic in tone, accusatory in tone.
Judgmental too.
Judgmental,
When you think about the
yeah.
wedding feast, the parable.
Yeah, and certainly the kingdom. We're going to do a series on the parables one day. They're lovely. And we'll have to use the Old Testament parables too, like this one. Okay, other thievery stories?
Ananias and Sapphira.
Ananias and Sapphira. What did they steal?
Well, they just told the tale about what they were giving. They pretended they were giving all, and they were only giving part.
Yeah.
So that's bearing false witness too. But
Hmm.
from what you said earlier, that stealing involves not following through with your commitment or promise. In that way, they withheld from the
Yeah, when we read the larger catechism, you'll see a lot of that elucidated. Any other ones? Achan. Whoa, yeah. Boy, did Israel pay for that one. So he stole some of the goods from a battle.
Yeah.
The devoted things, as it said EVS.
Oh,
Right.
ESV?
Oh, yeah. What did I say?
EVS. The other day at a sermon, I called it
It's okay. It's
SIC instead of, what was that crime scene? CSI. I said the wrong initials too in the wrong order. But okay, no problem.
ESP, that's
Your heart's in the right place.
That's why he did that. He's got work on his mind.
Oh, I see. Okay, that's good.
Rebecca
Yeah.
stole.
Pardon me?
Rebecca.
Rebecca stole some. Rebecca stole idols?
Yeah.
That's a
Is it Rebecca?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, wait.
No,
Ra-
it was
Rachel.
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 Yeah, that's
that's
good.
a good
That's a good.
story.
In fact, a lot of those Hebrew words relate to that very story.
She stole
That word. Yeah.
I don't know if Esau, or you mentioned the stolen
The stolen birthright.
suit.
Yeah.
Birthright. Not the stolen suit, stolen birthright, but I don't know if it picked up.
Here was my-
Ahab
here's-
and the
Oh yeah,
The field.
Jezebel and Naboth.
Right
Naboth,
here.
was it Naboth's field?
Naboth is murdered for his vineyard. Outright government graft and corruption. So when you said Nathan, and I thought you were saying Naboth.
Yeah. Well,
So-
there was something else that happened, and I think it's either in Ezra or Nehemiah. It's during that restoration time when they had come back from Babylon.
Yeah.
People were taking over people's homes or their farms or other things. There was a conflict about their possessions, and they had to go in and sort that out and be sure that people were not
Taking ancestral lands that weren't theirs.
Right. That was one of the things they were doing, and they were warned against that. So that refers back to what you said at the beginning. This commandment seems to imply that people, and of course the Bible says they did own certain property.
Oh,
It was
yeah.
theirs. It was not supposed to be taken away from them.
Yeah. There was this one commentator that quoted a French phrase. France has had some really interesting experiments with governments over the years. But I guess there's this French phrase that basically says property is theft and that everything should belong to everybody else. And, here in the United States, we value property. We life, liberty, and the pursuit of, and people say the pursuit of happiness really should be translated the pursuit of property. And our government and our institutions are far different. In so many countries, you're not allowed to own property. Like, for example, in Mexico, you only lease property. It belongs to the government. And the longest lease you can have is 100 years. You can buy a lease for land, but you cannot own land in Mexico. And some people have seen that as a little bit of a downfall in the United States because so many foreign entities can purchase our land and it belongs to them. And then what happens when people with nefarious intentions? There's, I guess, some very, very wealthy Chinese man who bought tons of acreage down on the Texas-Mexican border and built a large airport for some reason. A large airport. It's like, why would you need that? And why would a Chinese man come and do that? I don't want to accuse anybody of anything, but, should we let people from these areas? I don't know, just it's all political stuff. We have always had this default in the United States that people should have their own property and it belongs to them.
Well, it signified freedom for the people who settled this country.
Yeah.
Because they were in bondage to the people who did own the property, the places they came from.
Very nice. Yeah, that's good context. Good context. So, although, if you do buy a piece of property here, you can't do whatever you want with it, because I remember when we first moved to this beautiful part of the country, and I didn't get a welcome to Shelby County notice from anybody. It was, hey, you've got too much grass growing and water standing on your property. Take care of it. And then found out that it was MLGW pipe had broken on their side of the meter and it was flooding my yard. And so I was like my first several months on the land wondering, why is it always so wet in this place? Anyway, but I found out right away that they were going to fine me for not taking care of my property. So is it my property? If they can come and tell me, if you don't take care of this, we're going to abscond it from you. Very interesting detail about American government. Anyways, I was supposed to smile at Grampy. I was told to do that, so. All right, let's see.
When Samuel is supposed to say that if you get a king, he'll steal your sons, he'll steal your daughters, he'll steal your best goods.
Does he use the word steal? Is it ganav right there?
In King James, it's take.
Take. Well, yeah, it's interesting because in the New Testament, Paul says we should anticipate paying taxes and we should render to whom Jesus says that. Render unto Caesar what is. There is some understood contract with government, people in government, and the people for whom they rule over, that the government will take care of their streets and their safety, but they need to be paid some to do that. And that seems like the arrangement that we have. But all of the great early American founders who had religious convictions said, yes, you should govern, but you shouldn't govern so much. And how you find that balance. And I can talk about in our society, I think that there's been a lot of thievery going on in our country.
Some would
And
say our tax system is theft.
I have to understand that some taxation is required if I'm going to have someone take care of my stoplights, and certain things. That's the contract I make with them. But I don't want them telling me, like in some countries, you can't even homeschool. In Germany, you can't homeschool. It's like, I don't want my government telling me I can't do that. So it's a very, it's the balancing act that I think has made America great, because we do emphasize freedom, but there's also the responsibility for us to do our part. I just don't like the government telling me all the parts I have to do. Like, I get really upset when I'm told, you guys familiar with the Pandora Papers that came out recently? Where the super wealthy, thousands and thousands of documents where the super wealthy are hiding all of their money, that they don't pay taxes because it's all sheltered and put in safe havens. And yet the government wants to know anytime that I spend $600 or move $600 in my bank account, which, happens 3 times a year. I mean, what is going on with that type of control when the wealthy, and I don't know whatever this is going to sound like to people, but 1% of the stock market, of those who own stocks, the 1% owns 90% of the stock market. It's like, wow. So still, maybe we're knocking on the door of coveting already. So, but any New Testament verses that you guys think of that? Well, I'll just hit the point that I wanted to make immediately. Is the verse that godliness with contentment is great gain. To know, again, by providence, that God has me where he has me. He's given me certain gifts and skills. I should do here's Wesley's famous quote: earn as much as you can, save as much as you can, and give away as much as you can. So is money going to be my defining concern in life? Do I go to bed at night freaking out about my financial status, or do I go to bed at night thanking God for how he's blessed my life and that I have an opportunity to serve him in the ways that I do? So that's why I think godliness with contentment is a really powerful verse. Does everyone here besides me have the story where you actually did steal something and got found out? You have one of those stories?
Oh, yeah.
What was the result?
I had to take the little knife back to Walmart. I was probably 6, 7 years old.
Same story for me too. Came home from shopping with my mom, and I had something, and my mom, we're like poor immigrant family, and her heart would break that her kids could never ride the little nickel horsey in front of she couldn't spare that type of change. But I come home and I had some toy, and she said, "Where did you get that?" Well, I got it from the store. I didn't buy it. Well, I took it. Back in the car, straight to the owner. You tell them what you did and that you're sorry. And then when we got home, I was really sorry that I did that. So, and even trying to tell my own children that if you lie and if you steal, then almost everything down the road in the future is going to make us really hard to believe, your word is true. So, but those are the lessons that we're supposed to learn when we're young, and why, while we're young, we think, oh, this is something I really want, so I'm going to take it, which is what Naboth lost, because a selfish king wanted his property. He acted just like a kid. So it does destroy societies when our passions are out of control. I was thinking about one other thing. Oh, this is not a Bible story, but there's this person who did a famous series of YouTube videos on porch pirates. You guys all know what the porch pirate is? And because so much is being delivered to our doors now, and this one guy made the bomb.
The little glitter spray.
The glitter sprayer, fart sprayer, that if you brought it into your house and you opened it up, it filmed it. It documented everything that the people were saying. And once you opened it, the glitter bomb, your house gets covered with glitter and fart smell. And so your whole house. And it has like 4 iPhones in it documenting everything. And so he can find them back when they get discarded in the trash can. But there's this conversation that goes on about this little boy runs into the house. I think this is the way the story goes. Runs into the house and says, I got this off the neighbor's porch. And the mom says, oh, that's cool. And you're thinking, oh, this is terrible. And then this is the weird thing. The boy says, I think it's kind of neat that we can do this. And then she says, don't you think like that? It was like total mixed up messages. And then they proceed to open it. And then they get destroyed by the glitter bomb. But I wonder what's being taught in our homes, how our children are being taught about the value of other people's things. Do we teach them, you should be happy that person has something nice, and you should thank God that they can be blessed. Does that make sense? Well, that's kind of what the catechism says. So I have it on this screen here. It says, what are the duties required in the 8th commandment? This is the larger catechism. The duties required in the 8th commandment are truth. That's the first thing. Truth, faithfulness, and justice in contracts. So I think all of our societies, I don't care what kind of society, jungle societies, caveman societies, there's going to be a day when a guy says to another guy, can you do this for me? Let's shake hands on it, or let's burn fire on it, or whatever. There's always a contract of 2 people saying they will do something. And, so you go make your thing for that person, and do you make it in such a way that you will shave off a couple things that you make more money off of it, and you give them you do the letter of the law, but you don't do the spirit of law. You don't do the best in making that product for them and you chintz on it some way. You're stealing from that person. Every time you go home with a Post-it from your office that you plan to use for something else, or a paper clip, and how many times do we leave the office saying, oh, I work here. I do so much for them. I'm going to take this. Where God would say, no, that's stealing. It's class 1 stealing. Of course, everyone justifies their stealing because of some situation that they say why they deserve it. And I think there's even a proverb that says, yeah, we don't like thieves. We're kind of lenient on the guy who's starving, who steals some food. We sort of we don't press him all the way, but everyone seems to know how to justify why they're stealing. And this is actually going to lead into the thing where I'm looking at all the different commandments. If you don't think that stealing is problem, then I got to figure out what the result of it is for our society and for us personally. So if you have a good idea, let me know. But back to this. Contracts and commerce between man and man, rendering to everyone his due, restitution of goods unlawfully detained from the right owners thereof. And I'll pause right here for a moment, and you can know that the cross references to Exodus 20, which one are we looking at? Exodus 20 what? I can't remember. 15 goes to certain passages that say if an Israelite steals a man and sells that man to another person, the seller and the buyer are to be put to death. So slavery, the promulgation of slavery would be a capital offense according to the Bible, that specifically in Leviticus. But almost all of the theft consequences are paying back more than they took. And you find out that in ancient Israel, there's actually no jails. There's no prison time. If you do something wrong, you're going to pay for it and maybe forfeit your life, but you're going to pay for it. You're going to return to someone something. And then a lot of those verses are the dishonest scales and weights and measures. You know, you go to this goes back to my chincing analogy. You go to the market and you say, I'd like to buy a pound of grain or whatever, 3 shekels of grain. And then the person has this scale system that doesn't. So do you guys, when you go to the gasoline and you notice that there's a little seal there? I don't know who it is in Tennessee, but in California, every year those pumps had to have a seal that a man would measure that it was really putting out a gallon for a gallon. And if it wasn't, then the gas station would be fined. But so interesting job. And then the whole scary thing is that you could buy that guy off. So if people aren't honest, then the whole system goes down because you want to cheat all the customers on your gas, but all you have to do is pay the guy who's supposed to monitor you some of that money, and it's called a scam. It's called, what is that called when they shell game or a bribe? Definitely a bribe. And that seems to be the problem in almost every industry, is that a person can be bought off because they're not content and they don't honor a good name. And they think that having money is like the thing that brings joy to life.
Well, in this country, still, we think it's a bad thing. We still describe it as objectionable.
Yeah.
In a country like India, for example, where my brother spent a good bit of time, it's a way of life. And when you get to the toll booth to pay the toll, you bribe the toll keeper. It's just the way it works in India.
Vishal Mangalwadi, who is Indian, so like an Indian name, Indian theologian, very outspoken Christian, says that America still is a moral country because they still pay their taxes, whereas other countries, they don't pay their taxes. They get out of it some way. But you know how in the United States, if you have these graduated levels of paying income tax, and once you get to 100,000, you have to pay another percentage more. You just find out how many people make $999,000 because they don't want to jump to that level. And everybody's doing that up and down the scale. And we should just have a flat tax.
80% of the taxes in the U.S. are paid for what used to be, I think it was by the top
5-10%. Yeah,
10%
it's true. Yeah.
So all the other people that complain, the 99% that were always complaining, like, yeah, well, all that stuff that you have is coming from that 1%
Yeah.
also.
Yeah,
And oddly enough, about 40% of the country doesn't pay taxes at all.
that's true. That's true.
Also, here, I was somebody that worked for tax lawyers,
Oh,
even, excuse me. And
We should
that's
press it.
just an industry in itself, figuring out how to avoid being obligated to pay taxes. And tax lawyers are rich because they can figure it out.
yes, yes. What is it? Tax avoidance is not illegal. Tax evasion is. Did you catch that?
Right. You can find a legal way to put your money somewhere that it won't be taxed,
Exactly.
which is what these big Google and all that bunch of folks.
That's what the
that-
Pandora
that
Papers
have
revealed.
billions and billions and billions of dollars that are not taxed, and yet they run our country because they pay off our congressmen.
So, yeah, boy, this is going to open up everything because I just put that quote on my Facebook is if you've got billionaires in our societies, they will find a way to influence others with their money. And how will they do that primarily? By paying people off, by buying them off, by getting them to compromise the principles that made our country great, the principles of Scripture, because they think having money is more important to them than to have principles.
I don't
Yeah,
know.
we got to
I don't
raise
know if
kids who just reject that.
I don't know if Soros is about having money though. When you think of guys like George Soros, I think it's more about power.
In control, yeah.
Money
But
and
those
power.
with
That's true.
those with the most money do tend to have the most power.
Yes, they do.
Um,
And there's this kind of weird fascination we have with rich people. I think they're more,
like they're honorable. people.
yeah, honored instead of despised, unless you get to who are those people that used to be the Wall Street people that were like anti-Wall Street people. Oh, I forget the name of them. Anyways, there was a group that was very anti people benefiting from Wall Street riches. Anyways, continue on with this. Oh, I do want to say one last thing about how this whole system gets corrupted if people are not honest with their finances. There is a lot of waste, fraud, and abuse in the Medicare industry. Doctors doing things to earn more money in an unrighteous way. It's really sad to hear that. But in France, they found out that so many people were abusing the system that they hired a whole new layer of government for people to go and find out where the abuse was taking place and to uncover it and to stamp it out. And then they realized that layer of government was being bribed off. So another layer of people had to go watch them. And then after a while, everyone's working for the government, all trying to look after everybody else or how to pay each other off.
So it all starts at home, at
Mm.
the basic, most fundamental level. A lot of stuff people don't even think about. And I remember, because I'm sitting here and I'm listening to these different stories, and we're talking about stealing, and it starts off with truth.
Mm.
And one of my nephews, he's grown now, and he's been in the military and stuff, but he still remembers some stories, and he'll tell some things that I don't even remember. But one of the ones he remembers, and I do, is years and years ago when he was yay tall, I took him up to the Mumford Festival. And we found it was more than $1. I don't remember if it was $5, $10, $20 or something on the ground over in the children's ride section. And he's like, oh, I'm going to keep it. He's immediately thinking of all the things he can do. And no, we went and stood in a ticket booth line, because that's the only thing I could think of where there might be a lost and found, and went up there to turn it in. And it was some young person working there. I don't know what they ultimately did with the money, but she gave me the craziest look that I must be completely insane that we were turning.
Because it was
this
only
in.
$1.
No, it wasn't one. It was like 5, 10, 20.
Oh, I
whatever.
see.
It was more than one.
Okay.
And we were turning this in. And as my nephew told her, because he'd gotten it from me, he goes, but this could be some other child's lunch money.
Mhm.
They could starve without it.
Yeah.
I don't need to steal from somebody, because at the end of the day, it's not my money. I found it. And if you start them at that level, you're never going to be able to bribe them at the government. You're never going to
Wow.
do a doctor committing forgery. The problem is, how many people walk past money on the ground, pick it up, stick it in their pocket? You just
Yeah.
broke that, you stole.
Yeah.
And if you're doing it there, then you're going to do it in other things later. And more importantly, everybody around you will see that. And I would just always taught, don't keep something that's not mine, and didn't think anything of it. But he remembers that. And now when you're talking about this, I'm kind of, if you teach that,
Yeah.
because I was taught if it's not yours, you don't keep it, period. Turn it in.
This reminds me of two stories. The Bible has a number of verses, several, that say if you're out and you see someone's sheep or even your enemy's bull wandering about, you take it back to him. Because most people would say, oh, you're irresponsible and you can't take care of that animal, so I guess it's supposed to be mine anyway. But the Bible would say, no, if you know it's someone else's property, you make sure it gets back to them. Otherwise, you're stealing. Second thing is, I don't know if it's good or bad or not, but there's this little YouTube thing called Daily Dose of Internet. And it's just little cute little stories, and they're all pretty wholesome and amazing little stories and things. Well, some truck or some vehicle spilled all this money all over the road, and there's just cash lining the road. But what else is lining the road? All these cars that have pulled off and people running into traffic, and they're picking up all this free money. And what you're seeing is the money flying down the road and the people running out, and how many cars pulled over to start. And the guy says, by the way, this is a crime. That you're not allowed to take money. And he quoted some kind of legal phraseology that I listened to. And he says, this is what these people are doing is illegal. And of course, I'm like, I want to keep America beautiful. So I want to pick up all that trash.
Get rid of the litter.
That's right.
Animals can swallow those coins.
That's right. It was all cash, but
All
anyway.
bills.
Yeah.
Well, it'd be even worse if they swallowed all those
I
biscuits.
know all those bills.
All right, continuing on here, giving and lending freely. What is that all about? Something about restitution, detained from the rights owners thereof, giving and lending freely according to our abilities. These are required. So this is what we're supposed to do. That usury issue is really kind of an important thing in ancient Israel. About for a profit. And I remember my dad was an economist. He got his degree, doctorandus, from why do I forget his university? It's the guy who fought with Luther, Erasmus University. And he said how Western Europe became a financial powerhouse because they did lend with interest, where a lot of Jewish and Muslim countries wouldn't lend with interest. And the banking industries out of the Netherlands and London and all these places, I think even Roman Catholic countries did not lend with interest. And so there was sort of this advantage. And then one of our founding fathers says that I fear bankers more than I fear standing armies. But anyway, all right. We should give and lend freely according to our abilities and the necessity of others. Is this necessary? Moderation of our judgments, wills, and affections concerning worldly goods. And that's a big one there. Too many people have. Isn't looting the most pathetic thing? Do you really need 18 pairs of Nikes?
No, because you're going to go sell them
Yeah,
on Facebook
I
Marketplace.
just think it's the tackiest thing that you wouldn't honor, some storefront in your community and you just bash a window and steal something from them. It's repugnant to me. And someone made this observation in this one city where all these stores had been looted, and the only place that didn't get looted was the bookstore. No one wanted any books.
But
But
it
don't
goes,
steal their shoes.
but it goes back
Oh.
to what did you teach them when they were little?
Yeah.
Teaching them not keep what's not yours
Yeah.
and learn to read, and so you can earn your way. Or did you just neglect all that
Yeah.
and now you got the looting?
A provident care and study to get, keep, use, and dispose these things which are necessary and convenient for the sustenance of our nature. So it's not against earning and keeping and doing things with what you get, but you can't let it control you. And suitable to our condition, a lawful calling, and there's too many jobs and industries where it's all about making money, and we have some kind of street language for those people. And diligence in it, frugality. Couldn't say it. Avoiding unnecessary lawsuits. Yeah, you guys all know about the crash and fall people. Slip and fall, that's what it is, right? And suretyship. A surety is a deposit, right? Or other like engagements, and an endeavor by all just and lawful means to procure, preserve, and further the wealth and outward estate of others as well as our own. Are we happy to see our neighbor benefit? That whole phrase about keeping up with the Joneses. You should bless the Joneses. The grass is greener on the other side. You should be thankful that grass is green. And you should bless your neighbor for doing a good job with his lawn.
Invite him to come over.
That's right.
You're gonna help me with mine.
Exactly.
Come, let me bless you with my yard when it's cutting in.
The bigger the
What are the sins forbidden? Besides the neglect of the duties required. So there are duties required of us, but what we are not to do is theft, robbery, man stealing, and receiving anything that is stolen, fraudulent dealings, false weights and measures, removing landmarks. That's a good one.
Ooh.
You know how many people fight over property boundaries? Wow. Unjust and unfaithfulness in contracts between man and man or in matters of trust, oppression, extortion, usury, bribery, vexatious lawsuits, unjust enclosures, and depredation. You guys know what depredation is?
To be deprived of something.
Okay. Engrossing commodities to enhance the price.
Ooh.
That is like the way it's supposed to happen. As soon as there's a shortage, oh, guess what? The price went up.
Yep.
It's what the market will bear. That's capitalism.
That's just part of the process.
Yeah.
That's right. We expect too much.
Okay, enhance the price. Unlawful callings. That's again those bad positions that vocations people take up. And all other unjust or sinful ways of taking or withholding from our neighbor what belongs to him, or of enriching ourselves, covetousness, inordinate prizing and affecting worldly goods. Isn't it interesting? All those gambling places have to end their advertisements with, "Do you have a gambling problem? Dial." No.
Really, really fast.
Yeah, yeah. And I'm like, what were those numbers again? I'm going to bet on those. Distrustful and distracting cares and studies in getting, keeping, and using them. Do you know how many videos are online about, I can help you, what's going on in the world right now? Oh my goodness. Envying at the prosperity of others. I don't envy their prosperity, but I do sort of get suspicious of what we were talking about. They have the ability to influence people. That whole Zuckerbucks during this past election really bothers me because we're not allowed to give a certain amount to any candidate, but that guy gave millions and millions of dollars to people. And I'm sorry, Mr. YouTube, but there were people in Georgia the last 2 weeks before that election that got paid $2,000 a week just to get ready to vote, to tally votes. And that's what Zuckerberg paid for. So take it. Envying the prosperity of others, and likewise idleness, prodigality, say it. Prodigality, wasteful gaming, and all other ways whereby we do unduly prejudice our own outward estate, and defrauding ourselves of the due use and comfort of that estate which God has given us. Are we thankful for what God has given us? And I don't know. I just think that stealing is a real indication of someone who's not happy with themselves or their life, and they think that they can bring benefit to it by going against the right use of means of acquiring things, and having a sense of pride, not worldly pride or self-pride, but what's the better word for that? Just the contentment in knowing that they did things right, and what they have, they earned justly. So there was another thing that really came to my mind I wanted to talk about as we were reading through this, but I always have a ton of things I want to talk about. Any other insights about stealing and how we might I wonder, here's a good way for us to conclude. So this Sunday is Reformation Sunday. And I wanted to do a sermon on why the Reformation took place. And the thought came to me that I could really marry this commandment with what the Reformation really got started over, the Protestant Reformation. And then I typed in my search engine and found out that a dear blogger lady stole my title. Are you stealing God's glory?
Well, she stole your title. So.
I know who that is.
You know who that lady is? Like personally, or you've read her blog?
No, I know. Like I have a couple of recipe books.
Okay, well, she seems someone who's a Bible reader, and she concentrates on one of the Herods who, in all of his glory, wearing his robes, and he addresses the crowd, and the crowd says, "He is like a god," and then he falls down and is eaten by worms. And she sort of leans on that story, but that of the 5 solas of the Reformation, the last one being to God,
Glory of God.
yeah, to the glory of God alone. And somehow that Martin Luther really realized that the Roman Catholic Church was stealing God's glory and substituting forgiveness, and it was all underhanded. It was thievery. The whole indulgence thing, and God wasn't getting the glory. St. Peter's Cathedral was getting the glory, and Pope, whatever, who was the Pope, Pope Pius X, who was it then? Who knows? I should know. But anyway, so I think I am going to dial in a little bit on this angle here because it's Reformation Sunday. And if we do anything that takes glory away from God, we're stealing from him. What do you guys think about that?
I think something similar, not exactly from God, but like if you slander someone, you're stealing their reputation.
Yeah, very good.
Or if you take credit to yourself for something someone else has done.
Plagiarism.
And
Like a
Steve,
like a Southern Baptist president.
But don't we think that way about salvation? Who gets the glory for our salvation?
And that is so much a part. I have a Catholic family in my immediate family, and a big hiccup happened in communications between my grandchildren when one my daughters mentioned the 5 solas,
Yeah.
and the Catholic cousin pitched in and says, wrong-o.
Yeah.
That's what he said at the end of it, because we in our 5 solas, the church does not grant salvation. In the Catholic Church, the church grants salvation.
Wow.
This is tough.
The Council of Trent even said that, that to say that salvation is by faith alone, you are anathema.
Okay, well, that's kind of
And,
what
and
James
they
said.
cannot, and you cannot withdraw an anathema. Once it's there, it's there.
Well,
It never
they
goes away.
can, can't they? Can't they have another council?
Let's have,
They,
They're stuck to it.
they are stuck to it.
Be careful with your anathemas. All right.
Buy your way out.
maybe.
Confirmed by my way out.
All right. Now, this is a Latin Rite church we're talking about only, right?
I'm talking about the Catholic Church that my
Because those guys are fighting between each other.
really,
Those
my
Roman
grandson,
Catholics.
my grandson James, who had been a student for the priesthood, he no longer is, but at any rate, he's very committed to all of this goofiness that goes along with it. And he was
Well-
the one that said those things are not, your salvation is not from those.
It's a question of authority and who is going to define the lines for the game. And if the Roman Catholic Church defines salvation, it is kept in the storehouse of merit, and you have to access it through them, and they're the only ones who have the key to that box. So yeah, they are mediating where the Bible says that Christ is the only mediator between God and man.
And they can forgive sins.
Yes. Yeah. Where Jesus told his disciples that they will be able to forgive sins. But good Reformation thoughts. Because, we already know all about stealing. We got to talk more about the Reformation. All right. Well, good. Order of the day. Anything else juicy to share? Because everything you guys bring up, I steal. All right.
I hope you give a footnote during the sermon. Stop it.
All right. Let's close in prayer. Father in heaven, we thank you for your grace, which frees us up so much to not depend upon what we have to earn and get and possess. All things are from your favor and from your hand. And you raise people up, you bring people down, and we have to have confidence in your ways of doing things. You've certainly given us your commandments to define and shape our morality. And on this matter of stealing, that we would make sure that at the end of the day, we would take nothing from you, but see all things as a gift and to have thanksgiving for it. And we pray these things in Jesus' name, who is glorified, our King and Savior. Amen.
Is the service at Hickory with
Evening.